Boys would run away.
Yeah, because they want us to catch you.
No, so sketch.
You, then they would have to
We always thought it was like the mace.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did that every year.
Crowning of the May Queen in Catholic school.
I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lincoln Lancaster County Planning Commission of May 1st, 2019. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available at the front of the chambers with the clerk. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. If you parked in the parking garage across the street to the north, please be sure to pick up a parking coupon on your way out for free parking. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, the commissioners and the staff, cellular phone usage is not permitted in these chambers during any portion of this meeting. We will appreciate your cooperation. Please note the Planning Commission action today is final on Agenda Item 1.1, Special Permit 19017. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council or the County Board by filing a Notice of Appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or the County Board. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held April 17th, 2019. Is there a motion?
So moved, Campbell.
Second, Joy.
Please call the roll.
Okay. Campbell?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Jerry to read all of the consent agenda items into the record, and once those items are read, she will ask if there is anyone wishing to speak. If you do wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Jerry, will you please call the items on the consent agenda?
Yes, thank you. We have one item under the consent agenda today, item 1.1, a special permit 19017, to allow for the sale of alcohol for consumption on premises associated with a restaurant on property generally located at 4800 North 48th Street. Again, this is final action on this item unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
I see none.
Is there anyone here wishing to speak on this item? If so, please stand and state that item.
Okay, we'll entertain a motion.
So moved to approve, Campbell.
Second, Core.
Ready to vote?
Okay, this is for conditional approval of special permit 19017. Campbell?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
There are no requests for deferral, so we will now proceed to public hearings. The staff will make a brief presentation, and then the applicant will be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. If during your testimony you have copies of documents or materials you would like distributed to the Planning Commission members and or included as part of the record, please provide that information to the clerk for distribution. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes, then you will have 1 minute to wrap up your testimony. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the Commission votes to defer action or continue the public hearing. Jerry, please call the first public hearing item.
Okay. Item 4.1 is miscellaneous 19002, Lincoln MPO proposal, review of the draft fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2023 Transportation Improvement Program for compliance with the current Lincoln Metropolitan Planning Organization Long-Range Transportation Plan. The Planning Commission recommendation will be forwarded to the Lincoln MPO for final action. Staff recommendation is conformance with the long-range transportation plan. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
Nope.
All right, good afternoon. Paul Barnes of the Planning Department and also MPO staff. What we have before you is the draft TIP for fiscal years 2020 through 2023. The TIP is a 4-year schedule of transportation improvement projects that use federal dollars or those that will have significant impact on our transportation system. Some of those project types include projects that are on the federal aid system, so interstates, state highways, arterial roads, or public transportation projects such as StarTran projects, vehicle maintenance, or capital projects, projects that are otherwise eligible for federal funding such as bridges or bike and ped projects, and also regional projects that will have significant impacts on our system. The TIP document includes project descriptions for each, also a cost, funding source, and expected funding year. This TIP has been developed with all agencies that are included in the Lincoln MPO and has also been reviewed by our project selection committee. And as you know, the Lincoln MPO includes all of Lancaster County. So we did start with our project selection committee. They did meet on April 4th and recommended that the draft move forward with their approval. We had a meeting last week with the technical committee that the technical committee had voted and recommended their support and approval of the draft as well. And we are here before the Planning Commission today to determine and recommend your conformity with the Long-Range Transportation Plan. Your recommendation will then be forwarded on to the MPO Officials Committee, which will meet May 10th. I'll note that staff have reviewed these projects in the draft TIP, and we do find that they're in conformance. That's our recommendation to you. After the Officials Committee on May 10th, the draft TIP will be sent to the Nebraska Department of Transportation for their inclusion in the state TIP, which is a consolidation of all MPOs across the state. And then the final approval will be done by Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration. And when approved, that would occur October 1st later this year. So I'll just go over highlights of the agency's projects. This is similar to how we present the CIP to you, so it's a higher level, but if you have any detailed questions, we can sure answer those. So the first agency is the Nebraska Department of Transportation. In their program, they include a safety and system operations upgrade. They have 2 major maintenance projects, 5 repair and resurfacing projects, and 1 major system upgrade. Of course, that's the South Beltway. That's been in the TIP, and that is being carried forward. You also received additional information on a project that the state had requested to be added to the TIP, and that was a mill and overlay project on Highway 77. So that was delivered to you this morning. I'll also note that if this body recommends support for that, that your motion would need to reflect that as amended by staff. The Lancaster County Engineering Program includes 1 safety project and 2 roadway capital projects. The 2 capital projects are new to the TIP. These are new requests by the county, and they are for 2 segments of South 98th Street between Old Cheney and O Street. And I'd just like to note that since this is in such close proximity to Lincoln city limits in our urbanized area, that the city will be coordinating closely with the county on design and construction of that project. The next program is Lincoln Transportation Utilities, and they have projects that focus on traffic management, intelligent transportation system projects, traffic safety and operations, sidewalks, bridge improvements, and they also include 6 capital roadway projects. Those are the 14th and Old Cheney project, 2 segments of West A Street, Pine Lake Road, South 40th Street, and then the East Beltway Corridor Protection. The next program is for StarTran. They include operational and capital improvement programs in their proposal, and those are mostly funded through the Federal Transit Administration program, but also are matched by local dollars. And a couple of their larger projects are the proposed maintenance facility relocation and also looking at a multimodal center feasibility study. The next program is for the Airport Authority. They're also looking at operational and capital improvements. Those are typically funded through Federal Aviation Administration dollars and also matched by local funds. A significant project that they'll be working on, in addition to various runway improvements, would be the airport master plan. And I'd like to note that the MPO does include membership from the airport, and that the MPO would be working with them as they move forward with that master plan. Next program is FTA Programs, and we've carried forward the Department of Transportation Van Pool project and also the Section 5310 program. Both of those programs are shown in prior fiscal years. The next program is for Ped Bike and Trails. We have the Natural Resource District showing the Rosa Parks Way Trail. The MPO did an amendment at the beginning of this year to reprogram funds. In the first year of the current TIP, we're carrying that forward. And then from Lincoln Parks and Rec, we have 4 projects. Those include the Beal Slough Trail, Wilderness Park Bridges, Fletcher Landmark Trail, and Stonebridge Trail. And then lastly, we show the Railroad Transportation Safety District, and their major project is the at-grade separated crossing for 33rd and Cornhusker. Are there any questions?
I have a couple. I couldn't let you go. No, I'm kidding. On the StarTran projects, the maintenance facility construction relocation, has a site been identified yet? How far along are they in that?
So there is a site identified, and StarTran is working through environmental and other federal regulations to acquire that. So I believe that the acquisition hasn't been completed, but they're actually working on that.
And then kind of the same thing for the multimodal center. I know that they're getting ready to study, so that no site selection yet, but how much room are they looking for there? Like how many acres? Any idea?
Well, I think that would be a good outcome of a feasibility study, and I think that's a good first step before applying for the capital funds to build the facility. I do know that in the past there have been a few grant requests, such as the Tiger Grant or Build Grant, and in looking at sites downtown, it's been upwards of a city block footprint.
Okay. Are they, you probably don't know if they're going to keep it downtown or if they're going to...
You know, I think that they would like to stay in proximity to downtown, but I think, again, a feasibility study and how the different routes and transfer points would be decided, that would influence where that site would be located.
Great. Thank you.
Dick?
On the county's 98th Street project and the coordination with the city, do you know at this point whether that's going to be an offset build so that other lanes can be added in the future?
Yeah, so I think the way that it's shown in the TIP that's before you is a rural cross-section at this point. Now, I think that we do have other opportunities to talk to them about the design and how we can coordinate with them to do an offset rural to urban transition type of design that is on the very edge of the city limits, and so in the future it would be within Lincoln's jurisdiction. So I think it's an important conversation to have, and we'll make sure that that's happening.
Well, because north of O Street, that section's already in the city.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, as it goes through Waterford
Right.
Estates. Yep.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Is there testimony in support of this item? Is there testimony in opposition? Any other questions for Paul? Ready to vote?
Is it, do we have to put the amendment in first?
Yeah, well, let's do a motion with the amendment.
With the amendment?
Yeah, let's do it that way.
I'll move the adoption of the program and including the amendment from the Department of Transportation, the state.
Second.
I think we're just moving
It's
conformance.
from staff.
Conformance, yeah.
Conformance.
Conformance with a plan.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, discussion? Okay, I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, this is for finding of conformance with the LRTP as amended by staff. Campbell,
Yes.
Finnegan.
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Washington.
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Shear.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay, at this time, anyone wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda may do so. I think we do have someone who wants to speak to us.
Yes, sir.
Come on up and give us your name and address, and
I'll be happy to do so. My name is Richard Schmeling. My address is 4610 Van Dorn Street here in Lincoln. I wear many hats. One of my hats is I'm president of a group called Citizens for Improved Transit. And we're a fairly new group. You may not be very familiar with us, but I do have some handouts here that I can leave with each of you. Also, for purposes of my little speech this afternoon, I don't have enough for everybody, but I do have all route StarTran weekday maps for you. And those have schedules and maps. And I think you can kind of follow what I'm trying to tell you about by referring to that. First of all, of course, Dick Campbell and I go back a lot of years. If you ever want to know anything about the streetcars in College View, why Tracy Core is the person to ask, because she and I have done some things. Dean, you and I go back a lot of years, and it's good to see you again.
See you.
The rest of you I don't know, and please forgive me for the terrible joke that I told on your way into the meeting.
I thought it was funny.
Oh, okay, great. I have 5 minutes, and I probably got more to say than I can do in 5 minutes, but I'm going to try to hit the high points. In 2016, StarTran hired a group of consultants out of Seattle, and they came to Lincoln. They held a number of public hearings. They met with StarTran drivers. They met with StarTran staff, and they came up with a plan. This would be the update of the Transportation Development Plan, TDP. That was adopted. As part of that plan, they had 5 phases of additional steps that would be implemented as finances and time permitted. November 1st of 2016 is a landmark date because on that date, we substantially revised all the routes and schedules for StarTran in Lincoln. The idea was that we were going to do several things. Number one, we took the buses out of the residential areas. The residential areas are problematic because the streets are 25 miles an hour, they're twisty, turny, and the buses took a lot of time to go through there. Also, in the wintertime, there was a problem because if those streets were plowed, it was usually only a single lane. Then we had parked cars. The buses had trouble maneuvering. So we're now on their arterial streets. That has speeded up transit time for all the bus routes. Another change that was implemented was we lengthened the evening service. Prior to November 1st of 2016, we essentially had routes that shut down at 7 o'clock at night, the whole system. We had no evening service, although we have had that in Lincoln in the past. And now we have O Street, which goes, I think the last bus gets downtown at 11 o'clock. We have 13 and 27, and they quit about 10 o'clock. We have some other routes that quit at 9, some that quit at 8, and some that still quit at 7. And as we get money and support, we're going to try to get all the routes to run later in the evening. Another thing that increased was bus frequency. On most of the routes under the old system, you had 30-minute headway in the morning and evening rush periods. But during the middle of the day, it was an hour between buses. Right now, 44, O Street, 13, and 27 are every half hour all day long. And believe me, that's great. What's happened as a result of these changes? What we've seen is a steady 5% increase in bus ridership since those changes of November 1st. The consultants say when we get it all implemented, it may be a 7% increase. They predicted we'd dip when we first made the changes. We didn't dip. We started climbing and we haven't stopped. So we have more people riding the buses here in Lincoln. I told the city council, invest in the bus system and you'll see a return, and that's in fact what has happened. Now, you people on the Planning Commission play a very important role in this whole process. What I'd like to visit with you about is transportation-based zoning. Because nationwide, what we found is that when communities practice transportation-based zoning, it infuses the public transit system and results in more ridership. Portland, Oregon is a good example of this. The concept is basically this. You identify your major transportation corridors, and we pretty much have that, you know, with our bus system right now. You identify those corridors, then when you make zoning decisions, what you do is you zone more densely along the corridors. You put in high-rise apartment complexes and so on, and then you taper back from the dense zoning. You may go from the apartment type things, you may go to fourplexes and the duplexes, and then finally to single family. What kills public transit is when you put in a new subdivision with only single family along that corridor. That just isn't going to generate the ridership. There are two types of riders on public transportation. Those are the people who are captive riders. Those are people who are blind, who have disabilities, who can't afford a car, and so on. Those people will always have. What we're looking for is the people called choice riders. These are the people who own a car and could drive, but they choose to use public transit. And you have a sheet there that shows you how much money you can save each year by taking the bus instead of driving. And that's a sell that we're trying to make. A couple of things came up. One thing was the maintenance facility on West O. The current facility is very crowded. It was built years ago when the buses were smaller and when we had fewer buses. We're bursting at the seams down there. And so it's very important that we eventually move that maintenance facility out there on West O where there's a lot of room. Also, in terms of your planning, you know that we're looking at developing the area south of Haymarket. There's a developer that already has his eye on the StarTran space and ideas about how he can turn that into residential and commercial and so on. So the quicker we can get it done, the better. Right now, what we have to do, we don't have any fueling down there for the compressed natural gas buses. The fueling is way out on Cornhusker Highway at Sapp Brothers, and we're spending a lot of time and overtime with the bus drivers taking the buses out there to fuel. So we need to be able to fuel those buses at the new facility. What's coming down the pike? It's really interesting. We're going to have 4 battery electric buses come to Lincoln in 2020. Those are pretty neat. What you do is you plug them in, you charge them overnight, and they go out on the routes. And then when they come back, you probably run them 4 hours in the morning. They have a little break for 3 hours. You plug them in, they recharge, and then they go back out. And they are, virtually zero emissions. Our CNG buses are better than the diesel buses in terms of emission. We're, I think, about 50% CNG with StarTran right now. And as we go along and replace buses, eventually we'll be all CNG or battery electric. So it's really kind of a neat thing for the city of Lincoln. I have experienced transportation in many different locations. Portland, I rode the light rail system out there. I've ridden public transit in New York City. I'm familiar with it elsewhere. What I'd like to see as part of the long-range planning for Lincoln is for us to plug into that long-range plan projected light rail routes. Now, I have an idea. My own personal idea is O Street. I say that because O Street right now is our #1 route in terms of ridership, and we have growth further east. And it seems to me that's a logical place to put the first light rail line. A problem that I see looking at our StarTrans system is that we have an old system which is called hub and spoke. The hub is downtown. When we had lots of retailing downtown, that made sense, but our retailing is gone. And we have specialty shops downtown. So when we talk about locating that terminal transfer facility, we maybe need to look at putting it someplace other than downtown. Maybe out at Gateway, there's some vacant land out there. Then what you do is you have your hub in the middle of the system and you spoke out in all directions. And if I live in southeast Lincoln, I live at roughly 48th and Van Dorn. I'm just outside of Tracy's College View Neighborhood Association, but I'm a near neighbor. And when I want to go from home to northeast Lincoln under the current system, I have to come all the way down to Goals and change routes. And that's pretty much true for all the trips in Lincoln. So we maybe need to at least modify our hub and spoke system and do something that's called a grid system where we have crosstown routes, and then it becomes easier to go from quadrant here to quadrant here, or quadrant here to quadrant here. And that's something that I think it's sound transportation planning. But again, you folks may play a role in this in your zoning decisions. You know, if you can see how some of what you're doing kind of impacts the futuristic vision for transportation in Lincoln, then I think you can make some wise decisions. I haven't really presented to your office much about transportation-based zoning, but I know from visiting with the people in your office, they're familiar with the concept. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily see this as being antipathetic toward some of the other things you're pushing, like the village within the bigger community and so on, because I think all of this can fit together very nicely. So my 5 minutes are probably up.
Yeah, questions? Maya?
This isn't a question, but I would just encourage you to come back with your comments and maybe more detailed comments when we do our update of our comprehensive plan, which
Okay.
we do regularly. This is really a kind of a bird's eye view issue that you're talking about, and that's really the time and place for us to talk about those kind of vision and mission issues. So I would encourage you to come back and talk to us then.
Mm-hmm.
I will, and I promise not to tell a dumb joke.
Dick?
Richard, on the funding for transportation, is it mostly, I know we put some local money in, but is it mostly federal dollars that are?
The bulk of it is. Right now, the formula for the state, and this would be true of Lincoln, Omaha, or any other community that has a bus system, 60 federal, 20 state, 20 local. Now that changed a couple of years ago. There was a bill in the legislature. Some of the smaller communities were having trouble coming up with a 30% local match. And so what they did was they upped the state proportion and lowered the local match, yeah. So about 60, 20, 20.
Where is the biggest bottleneck on the funding?
The biggest bottleneck on the funding is our current president. You recall that what he did was he campaigned that he was going to improve our infrastructure. He has not moved in that direction. And unless you get a president that gets behind it and pushes it, then you've got a problem. And his recommended federal budget currently would not fund the long-distance passenger trains like our 2 San Francisco Zephyr trains through Lincoln. He wants to abolish long-distance passenger trains. And that I'm sorry, but that's not improving infrastructure, that's taking away from it. And I think that's our biggest obstacle. My experience with the Beitler administration and our current city council is all of them are very much buying into public transit in Lincoln. They've been very good to us. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen a week from now, but I would say the composition of our council is going to be pretty much the same, and I would hope that we'd see a continuation of the idea of beefing up our public transit.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you very much.
Okay, informational question for me. Do we have any idea when you'd like me to come back, when we're going to be talking about the comprehensive plan?
Good opportunity to put this on the record. David Carey with the Planning Department. So our more formalized process of updating plan will begin in 2020, and that'll be going through 2021, so it'll be about a 2-year process.
Okay.
There'll be a lot of opportunity for those discussions, and we hope we have them.
Okay,
Okay.
good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This was good.
David?
So I have one more item to wrap up our meeting today. If you didn't hear and don't know, this will be Amy's last meeting with us. She has, on a personal note, very happy for her that she gets to take on an opportunity that sounds very exciting over at the library. So she'll still be with the city, but this will be her last meeting, and is in fact her last day with the planning department today. So I want to wish her well and thank her for her many years of service. I mentioned this to you in an email earlier, but I want to put it on the record that your presence and your work has really advanced us. We have improved our processes and our both professionalism and abilities to get a lot done very efficiently. So thank you very much for all of your work. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Amy.
Something about Amy.
Yes.
So I have previously commended Amy on her excellent minute-taking skills, and last time I did, she took herself out of the record. So this time, I am requesting that my comment stays in, and I'd like to thank you for the incredible minute-taking that you've been doing. It's been helpful for all of us, and it'll be helpful for planning commissioners and council members for a long time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure working with all of you and getting to know all of you. Thank
We'll
you.
miss you.
Thank
We
you.
really
you.
will.
Yep. Okay, I think with that, we're adjourned.